Smoke control in high-rise fires. Let's use the next 30 minutes to discuss this topic, because I'm convinced that if you are not dealing with this topic, this can be the cause of a really severe and bad outcome of high-rise fires. I'm Michael Reich. I'm a regional fire chief in Germany with a background of fire safety engineering, the design of buildings for fire safety. But since 20 years, I'm a career fire chief in my region. If we look at different fires all around the world, we see that there are different ventilation profiles, that there's smoke, that there is air flowing inwards and outwards, and that smoke is spreading into buildings, and that with our action as firefighters we interfere with this smoke spread in buildings. But all of our own thoughts, our own experience is somehow limited to what we experienced before, to the facts that we have seen, that we think we might have seen, and how we interact with this experience. And we all have to be aware that firefighting experience is influenced by our equipment, by our tactic, our training, by the ability of our members, by our built environment, and also by our tradition. And I think this is valid worldwide. To successfully fight a fire, especially in high-rise buildings, we have to do some tactical decisions. First, we have to think if we have to rescue people first or if we want to extinguish the fire first. Because with limited resources, you have to decide which is your main and first target. But both of these targets and tasks have influence on air and smoke flows in buildings. If you want to rescue people, you can either take them out of the building or defend them in place. And these safe place concepts are also used worldwide, especially in very large, very tall, very huge buildings. And on the other side, if you want to keep people in place, if you think about using the safe place concepts in high-rise buildings, you have to be aware that you have to control smoke flows. You have to deal with fire ventilation. The hazarded areas in buildings are the areas where you have fire or smoke or smoke. And especially the attack and egress routes in the building are important. So we have to realize that smoke is toxic, has high temperature and causes low visibility. So we all have to deal somehow with stairway protection and smoke flow control as a key factor of our firefighting procedure. Looking at incidents all around the world, just one example of a fire in New York. They open up the doors, normal procedure, fine job, but this allows smoke to spread, for example, in this case, into the common lobby, the common hallway. And this is the view of a civilian which is in the adjacent apartment. He locks himself into his apartment. Maybe he's told to do so. He's sheltering in place. Everything is fine, but if we do this procedure, we somehow have to ensure that we get the people out of the building without bringing them into danger. And they decide sometimes when they want to leave the building. And for us, it's sometimes difficult to control what they are doing. And if we look at civilians, we also have to look at our firefighters. How trained are they? I have a deep respect of the Paris Fire Department. They are very well trained, doing exercise on a regular basis. They can do rescues and access buildings with hook ladders in heights. If your fire department can do it, you're lucky. I don't think that this is the case on a worldwide basis. So we can fight fires as we train, and we have to keep in mind the abilities of our firefighters. There have been fires all around the world with a very severe and bad outcome. For example, a few years ago in London, the fire at Grenfell Tower, where 72 people died. The fire department of London now uses smoke codes. They have smoke curtains, and they are dealing with different topics, and these are just some of the lessons learned, but I think one of the important ones regarding the fire service. Every one of us has a different built environment, and if I look for Germany, I have to realize that half of our population, more than 40 million people, live in multi-storey buildings. And we realize in our experience with these incidents that it's very important to keep the stairways smoke-free, because this transfers a two-dimensional problem of a fire in an apartment into a three-dimensional problem and uses up much of our resources. So keeping the stairway smoke-free is an essential task, and very often used in our environment. So some call it flow path control. Well, basically the question of a fire in a large building is how it is contained, how much access does it have to oxygen, how does it develop, is there a sprinkler system in large buildings, or is it a fire in a closed compartment with a limited amount of oxygen? Are there any flows, or is this fire contained in a restricted volume? As soon as you open up doors or windows, the fire has access to additional oxygen, and you get flows. Flows of smoke coming out of the compartment, which we easily see because they are normally black or have some color, and they are easy to recognize. But we also have flow of fresh air flowing inwards into the fire compartment, and these bidirectional flows, for example, from a fire compartment level into the staircase, they interfere with our action, and sometimes the fire service is the cause of these flows, and they interfere with our procedures. If you're looking at buildings and examples and fires all around the world, these are just some pictures of fires where you can see how smoke flows into staircases, how the action of the fire department interferes with these situations. We have to open doors, we have to stretch our hose lines, and these actions contribute to the amount of smoke that can travel through buildings. And depending how the building is designed, maybe you have a pressurization systems, maybe you have a well-designed and well-maintained building with systems that help you normally to prevent smoke spread. But we have to realize that not all designers of these buildings are aware how fire departments attack fires, what their tactic and procedures are. Some maybe even seem not to know that the fire service has to stretch hoses. And if we stretch a hose line and the door behind closes, we have a problem with our water supply. And if this hose line is charged, this door is blocked, and the firefighters even might have trouble leaving the building, which is a dangerous situation for firefighting crews. So all around the world, the topic door control is discussed. Well, in different meanings and in different ways. Some have special ideas about it. Some use wooden chocks. If you go into ships, into vessels, they also have to deal with smoke spread. So they have small doors indoors, which help them stretch a hose line and close the door behind them to avoid smoke spread. In some countries, people think about cutting doors into half. And this is just a summary of different ways to perform law control all around the world. If you look at fire burning regimes and flows, situation number A would be the normal natural situation with bidirectional flows, maybe either interior or through exterior openings. And if you have these situations, we have to discuss how we proceed to the fire, how we can avoid these flows. And some people like to have positive pressure attack in some areas of the world. Well, it has a lot of advantages, but also some disadvantages you have to be aware of. And some countries discuss unidirectional flows, and some discuss that you want to prevent the amount of oxygen flowing to the fires. So starting in number C with a limited airflow, limited access to additional oxygen to the fire, unidirectional flow, and as soon as you have water on the fire, some want to move to the situation B. This is just a summarization. I'm not sure that the fire service all around the world is really aware of these different flow regimes. Unidirectional flow is nice. It has less turbulence, less mixing, but the upper sketch is the normal situation. So having a bidirectional flow also means that you're increasing the amount of smoke, that you're introducing oxygen into burning compartment, and this has a lot of thermodynamic influences. I'm not going too deep into these things, but it's very interesting also for firefighting practice. And yes, you can calculate a lot of these things. This is just an example of a calculation about smoke spread in building, discussing 11 parameters from the size of the fan, number 1, and into the staircase parameters, number 4, 6, and 7 openings, number 5, the opening of the door to the fire compartment, number 10, the openings to the outside, and number 11 would be wind. So wind is an interesting topic, especially in high-rise fires. And number 5, the entrance door from the staircase to the burning compartment or to the level where the fire is a very important position to influence smoke spread. Now, some countries have more, some less experience with smoke spread control. This, for example, is an incident in Germany in 2006. So decades nearly ago, a children's room was totally on fire. The corridor was very hot. You see gypsum falling from the roof, and the stairway with a smoke stopper, smoke curtain, was kept totally smoke-free as the main attack route and escape route for the people in the building. Munich 2008 also shows the use of a smoke curtain to prevent smoke flow into staircases. Fire in Germany in a hospital with also a main task, a main aim to protect the people, because you can't evacuate a hospital totally, so you have to care about smoke spread while you're opening doors, you're forcing doors, and while you try to get water off the fire and extinguish it and get the smoke out of the building. Now Berlin in 2013, huge apartment fire in a multi-storey building with stairway protection. In Vienna, the same thing, that people actually do and deal with stairway protection. A high-rise fire in Hong Kong, same topic all around the world, preventing smoke spread into staircases. This is a nice example from Paris, just July 2020, and if you look at this fire, a severe, fully developed apartment fire, very nice footage from the fire department of Paris. shows how they protect the staircase, how they go interior with their hose line, how they attack the fire, get water on the seat of the fire and extinguish it. But stairway protection and rescue operation always have to go hand in hand. High-rise fire in my area in 2019, a fire on the 7th floor with a handicapped person trapped. You'll see the stairway with a double door situation, and between these double doors there is a dry riser. So the first line can go from the dry riser, but it blocks one of the doors. And as soon as the firefighters stretch the second line, the backup line, which is also nearly universal, that you go in with a second line. If this second line comes from the staircase and you're not preventing smoke spread, then you're opening doors and you're interfering with your firefighting interaction with the system that was pre-designed in the building to prevent smoke spread. So some universal statements which I think are very important. First thing, the experience of the fire service all around the world is limited. That's not bad, it's true. Limited to how we've always done it as a nice sentence, but limited to the equipment we used so far. We can only get experience with the equipment we are using so far. And we are fighting as we are training. So if you do certain training, you can expect that your firefighter will use this training and try with this knowledge to work into the next fires. So we have to think about things that happen and train our firefighters for these things, and then they can fight these situations. Some universal statements: be aware of yourself and your environment. If you have well-maintained buildings, building with pre-pressurized systems, building maybe with no maintenance, maybe there are systems but they don't work, or just people or buildings have no system because national laws don't demand it. This is your environment and you have to fight fires in this environment all around the world. Your society is different. How do people react? How do they comply with the advice of the fire service? Do they stay in place, or do in some time of a firefighting procedure they decide that they want to leave the building, they feel not secure anymore? So how do they behave during a fire? When do they want to leave the building? What is your fire service tradition, strength and experience? How do they fight fires, and how do they actually use their tactic and their training to do the job on the day when it's needed? So a lot of fire departments do things differently all around the world, and it's interesting why. Sometimes you can explain it because these factors are different: building, society and the fire service. Sometimes it's hard to understand why fire services around the world do similar tasks, sometimes quite differently. So you have to know as a fire service if you are in rescue or in extinguishing mode. Do you want to do a full evacuation of a building, or do you want to defend in place and keep the people where they are and extinguish the fire? An extinguishment can be either aggressive or defensive. Defensive meaning that you're trying to confine the fire, that maybe you give the fire 1 or 2 more minutes, but you're preventing smoke spread and fire spread, depending if the fire is able maybe to go into the rest of the building through interior path, or maybe on the facade on the outside. So to know your strategy, you have to know the basics. The chiefs have to be in tactics, and everyone on fire scene has to be have to have some knowledge on fire dynamics. They have to know what they are doing, and actually the people on the hose line, they have to have the right skills for extinguishment, and everyone on scene has to be trained and sensitive for smoke spread control, because everyone on the fire ground, if he's just opening doors or windows, is interfering with the smoke spread and the ventilation system in the building. So smoke spread control is absolutely essential. You have to know your environment regarding building ventilation, if there are pre-designed systems, if doors have a meaning, a purpose, and if you are allowed to open them, to stretch a hose line through them, and to somehow block their meaning from fire safety design of buildings. Nearly every action on the fire ground influences smoke spread, and smoke is the main cause of people being influenced by the fire, and even people getting killed in fires. So we have to look at basic things that are common around the world. Protect the stairway is a very important topic in most areas of the world. There are some areas where it's not discussed by just this expression, but people still have some awareness of it. Sometimes it's supported by building design, sometimes it's supported by the action of the fire service with smoke curtains, but none of these procedures are really universal. We have to get water on the fire fast. I think we as a fire service agree on such a statement that will limit and reduce our problem if we take away the source of the problem. But how we do it, how we allow ourselves to stretch hose lines, how we allow ourselves to force doors, and how aggressive we can do it is also, I think, which has to be a tactical decision. We should be able to rescue people through smoke-filled areas. This is some basic task. For example, this is one of my RIT teams. Such a RIT team can rescue either one fallen firefighter, but all of them also have a rescue hood with an air supply. So such a RIT team out of 4 people is also able to take a family with 4 civilians and guide them through a smoke-filled staircase. And in some other areas, attack teams have at least the equipment of having one smoke hood, either with a filter or connected with the air supply to the bottle of the firefighter. So also different equipment, and you can only use on the day when there is a fire in a building the equipment you are trained and you actually have available. Stabilize the situation first is a well-proven tactic in all of our emergency incidents. Do not make it worse, and then you have to deal with a escalated situation. And smoke spread definitely is the cause that can accelerate our problem, making a fire from a 2-dimensional problem on one level on a building to a 3-dimensional problem regarding the whole building. Protect egress routes, the horizontal ones, the vertical ones, and especially the staircases, and you have to do it especially if you use a stay-in-place strategy. Different possibilities with 1 or 2 smoke curtains, widely used in some areas, in a lot of areas around the world, but nearly not everywhere. So smoke spread control, if you look at incidents, is essential. And if you look at the incidents that really turned wrong, that went into the wrong direction and had a bad outcome, you will find that a lot of them have had the problem that fire control or smoke control was not performed in a way and was not really successful. And we have to go for stairway protection, at least in some areas around the world. This needs a higher importance. With this limited amount of time, I just wanted to show you some strategies which are used around the world. You have to be open, you have to look what other fire services all around do. Sometimes they have a similar environment than you have, but sometimes because of tradition they do things differently. but we are one world, and it's easy to see through the internet what other fire departments do around the world. And as a professional fire service, there's no excuse for us not knowing what equipment and what tools are successfully used all around the world. And we have to judge with our fire service if these tools, this tactic is necessary and useful also in our environment to prevent bad outcomes and to be able to rescue civilians. Thank you for being with me for this presentation, and I hope every one of you takes something with him and can adopt it into his fire service. Thank you.